The Department of Defense has a new report detailing the threat posed by members of the armed forces who are white supremacists. And joining us to break this down, what it might look like in the future, is the political director for Common Defense, Alex McCoy, joins us once again. Alex, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. Wish we could be talking about something more positive, but unfortunately, you go to war with the white supremacists you have, not the white supremacists you wish you had. But anyway, what did you think about this report when you saw it? That they're making clear that this does exist. It is potentially a threat, that they could perform some sort of mass action. I think they're calling it some sort of very dangerous thing could happen.
Yeah, well, this is something that is not a surprise to rank and file troops. But it is good to see that at the highest level, the military is now acknowledging there's a problem and is committing to do something about it. It remains to be seen how serious they're gonna be about that though, and what steps are actually gonna be taken that are going to address the systemic problem, not just make an example of a couple individuals.
Obviously, when you're trying to enter into the military, and I'm sure there's differences between the different branches, there are a variety of different ways that they screen people for different things. Is there anything that in theory could have gotten people who subscribe to white supremacy or other sorts of ideologies like that? What is that process like?
Well, the process at the current time is pretty minimal. Basically, what they're going to do is they're going to evaluate: do you have any tattoos that are known to be representative of extremist groups? So, for example, if you have a swastika tattoo or some other tattoo that is affiliated with a neo-Nazi organization, but that's obviously just a narrow segment of the people who have an extremist ideology, that are gonna have visible, permanent, markings on their body that indicate that. The other thing that they do is sort of very basic survey questions that are easy to lie about. They'll just be like, do you believe in overturning the US government, or something of that nature? Are you an extremist? And a lot of extremists will say, no, I'm not an extremist. I'm just a nationalist who believes in, protecting my race, right? Like, they're not going to self-identify like that. So really what is required is something a lot more thorough. And it requires defining extremism in a way that is actionable for recruiters and actionable for commanders, and is something that can be looked for in, for example, new recruits or current service members' social media postings. One of the things that we've been asking for the Department of Defense to do is conduct an audit of government search for people who are subscribed to extremist groups' email newsletters, because that's something that a lot of people are dumb enough to have subscribed using their government account. It's evidence that they can't delete. And it's something that is actionable, that is hard for them to deny.
That's certainly interesting. I instantly, when you start to propose things like that, I think of how some in the media or politicians might respond to it. I mean, I know, in the wake of the January 6th attack, there's cable shows with huge followings that are denying that white supremacy exists, let alone in the military. So do you think that if there were to be these new, something like what you're saying, the social media screening, emails and things like that, do you expect that there would be pushback against that?
Well, I certainly expect the party of Donald Trump to deny that this is a problem and to fight to uphold the rights of white extremists to get military training in how to kill people. But I think that doesn't mean that we should shy away from this problem, because the troops say that this is a big issue. The Military Times has conducted a poll of service members that found that 1 in 3 troops in uniform knew of a white nationalist in the ranks with them. And that was about 40% when you looked at just people of color who were serving in the ranks, who said that they knew or had seen white nationalism represented in the ranks around them. So I don't think that there is a necessarily huge percentage of the troops who are these extremists, but I think that a lot of troops encounter individual extremists in their units, and that we're not seeing the military do enough about this. There was recent reporting of a Marine in San Diego area who was given a very minor disciplinary slap on the wrist a couple years ago for being the chairman of a nationalist organization. And then that has since been revisited due to local newspaper reporting that revealed his activity. And now they are administratively separating this Marine. So this is a case of there was not enough taking this problem seriously in past years, and now we need to see the actual accountability take place.
Yeah, that's certainly interesting. And you mentioned that the overall message of this report would not come as a surprise to people who've served. So in practice, what is that like? Is that something that you've experienced? Does this mean are people just they feel just comfortable expressing these sorts of sentiments in casual conversation while deployed? How do people become aware of the fact that there are soldiers with these predispositions?
Well, I think it's in part a consequence of our forever wars that we've been fighting for the past 20 years. That people who have a racist, extremist ideology become attracted to the opportunity to go fight in these forever wars against communities of color in the Middle East, elsewhere. I think that we really need to end these wars in part because of the toxicity that it has brought to our society. I think that there's also just, a pervasive culture of lack of accountability and lack of scrutiny in the military that is starting to change, but needs more work. When I was serving in the Marine Corps between 2008 and 2013, there was a scandal where the elite scout sniper unit were using tattoos and flags that had the Waffen-SS Nazi logo. They had adopted this Nazi iconography as a symbol of their sniper community. And this was something that came out and wasn't a surprise to anyone who had been interacting with that community. But it speaks to sort of a deeper rot of just thinking extremism is cool and not doing the training and the cultural work to make sure that these impressionable 18, 19-year-old kids that are joining the military are living up to the values that we want our military to uphold and understand what their oath to the Constitution is supposed to mean.
Wow, that's crazy. Actually, I missed that one. That is a crazy story. But finally, I want to ask you about what's at risk. So when we talk about the threat of there being white supremacists in the military, is this mainly a thing where we're worried that they will gain certain types of training and then after the military they'll use it in some capacity? Or is there also a threat of active duty soldiers potentially doing something?
Yeah, I think there are two risks, one physical and one to our culture. The physical one is obviously we do not want people who have an extremist, racist ideology to gain access to advanced combat training and weapon skills that then they will wield against innocent people. That's a big problem. We take this very seriously when it comes to gangs and criminal history. For example, we need to apply that same thing to these extremist ideas, these extremist political groups. There's also a big problem of these kinds of extremist, nationalist, racist groups trying to use an association with the military as a way to launder their ideology and make it seem more mainstream and seem like it's somehow inherent in being an American to have their extremist ideas. The military is a very highly trusted institution in polls. It is an institution that people associate with defending your community, with public service, with sacrifice, with getting screwed by the system. And these ideas have a lot of resonance with regular people. And so if you say people like me who serve in the military have these beliefs, that makes these beliefs seem more palatable to regular Americans. And so this is the big fear, right? You see these kind of anti-immigrant groups, these right-wing extremist groups, these anti-Muslim groups try to brag about how, pro-troops they are and how they're a bunch of veterans and that means that this is something inherently American to hold these ideas when that's very much not the case.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I actually hadn't been thinking about that component, so I'm glad that you mentioned it. Alex McCoy is the political director of Common Defense. Alex, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your perspective.
Thanks, and if you're a veteran out there, sign up at commondefense.us/join.
Thank you.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.